Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, let me first salute the men and women in the service who work at Port Elizabeth and Newark International Airport. They do a fantastic job. And the mega port of the East Coast, we appreciate their work. But I want to turn to a line of questioning that started off where the chairman started off his line of questioning. On June the 18th, Secretary Nielsen said that if an adult enters at a port of entry and claims asylum, they will not face prosecution for illegal entry. They have not committed a crime by coming to the port of entry. And the same day, the Department of Homeland Security called it a myth that families who cross the border seek asylum at ports of entry are separated. But advocates and press stories tell us a different story. How many children were, in fact, separated from their parents at ports of entry during the family separation policy?
Under the zero tolerance and prosecutions, family separation efforts, zero. We had 7 separations during that time period that were due to an unproven family relationship or an unrelated criminal history or violation. There were several thousand, 5,200 families that arrived during that time frame. None of them were separated. None of them were separated due to prosecution just for claiming asylum. So that was a myth.
None at a port of entry, you're telling me none at a port of entry were separated?
Not purely for the zero tolerance initiative. There had to be an underlying criminal history element or something else in the presentation, fraud or not a family relationship.
That would be the only reason they would have been separated?
Correct.
Let me ask you this. One of the things that we keep hearing about is that DHS has repeatedly encouraged migrants seeking asylum, well, first to do it in their home country, but if not, to do it, to cross at ports of entry and not in between ports of entry. Now, we've seen pictures of custom officers standing on bridges on the border in El Paso, keeping migrants on the Mexican side of the border. And that has prompted some, those seeking asylum to set up camps on the bridges while they're waiting to make an asylum claim. Now, CBP claims that no one at a port of entry is being denied an opportunity to make a claim of asylum, but that there are capacity issues. Effectively, asylum seekers are being turned away at ports of entry and told to come back later. How long are the wait times at the port of entry on the southern border to receive families who are claiming asylum?
Sure. This is something we monitor very carefully. We have a daily report that I receive, that our Executive Assistant Commissioner for Field Operations receives, and on any given day, at our 26 international crossings on that southwest border, there might be 3 to 4 ports that have any wait time for people that want to present without documents. Generally, 1 or 2 of the ports in Texas will have 10 to 50 people waiting. They'll be waiting a matter of hours, generally processed in the same day. The one outlier we have is the port of entry in San Ysidro, which is between San Diego and Tijuana, as you know, where the majority of people arriving seeking asylum come in. There's a shelter network there. There's an effort coordinated by our Mexican counterparts to provide people awareness on when they can come to the port of entry, when we have space. But that balance to try to make sure that people are housed in space where we have capacity, where it's a safe and appropriate environment, as well as balancing across all of the other missions that we've talked about, is what we're trying to manage.
How many potential asylum seekers are waiting on the other side, who have waited, have presented themselves formally to a port of entry, but cannot be processed because of capacity issues?
Border-wide or in San Ysidro?
Let's start with San Ysidro. You said that's the biggest.
San Ysidro is the 95+% of the folks waiting are in San Ysidro. It's over 1,000 right now.
Over 1,000?
Correct.
How long have they been waiting there?
On average, 7 to 14 days is the current information I have.
And what have you instructed CBP officials to tell individuals seeking asylum when they come to a port of entry? And what are you doing to accelerate the ability to actually take their asylum applications?
So, as you know, our ability to take people in depends on our counterparts in the immigration system to pick them up after we finish processing them at the port of entry. So it depends on ICE capacity to pick people up who are in our custody. It depends on our staffing capacity. Just to give the committee and the people watching a sense of how much effort goes into this, at San Ysidro, where we have 130,000 people arriving a day, 20+% of our arrivals on the southwest border. We take about 10 to 15% of our staff.
Those are not asylum seekers.
No,
just
those are lawful
yeah.
travelers for commerce.
Right.
We take about 10 to 15% of our staff to focus on those arriving without documents, and we're taking in anywhere from 50 to 100 a day. So it's a huge effort to carefully process them, to do interviews and sworn statements, and we're trying to balance that against that lawful travel and the fact that San Ysidro is one of our top locations for illicit narcotics trying to enter the country. So it's a balance every day. We're trying to take as many people as we can in who present without documents. As you point out, that is the lawful, appropriate way to seek asylum in the U.S.
I'll submit the question for the record, but I'd like to know what is the totality of the other ports, this being the largest one, obviously, but I'd like to know the totality.
Today there was one port with 50 and another with 25
That's it?
waiting. Correct.
That's it. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.